Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown series, our show in which we look at the players that have been linked to Arsenal, break them down in an analytical and statistical way with the help of some expert insight to keep you guys up to date and educated about the likelihood of these deals, what these players are about, so you don't have to spend hours on end researching and watching clips to find out as much as you feasibly can from a YouTube compilation, which is obviously geared towards telling you they're as good as Ronaldinho. Anyway, absolute pleasure to have you in here today, and thank you so much for joining us. If you are new to the show, please make sure you drop a like on the video and subscribe. And even if you're not new, you should be liking the video. But thank you ever so much for tuning in. If you are new, we do these videos for every single player that Arsenal gets linked to credibly, and we break them down. We source the expert insight for you, and we try and keep you up to date with as much as feasibly possible. And today we are talking about James Maddison. Now, it was less than 24 hours ago that, of course, we talked about this on social media. Wasn't sure if we were going to do this video because of the credibility of the links, but from popular demands and from the fact that we've seen some other credible sources come out and talk about this deal has obviously led to us pursuing and researching James Maddison. Now, as soon as I saw these links, there was only one man that I was going to message, and that was the Athletics' Rob Tanner, who is Leicester City's, Leicester City correspondent. And Rob was talking to me last night about this, and I asked him if he was up for doing a video on James Maddison to give you guys the insight that he was giving me, and he agreed to it, which is fantastic. So we're going to hear from Rob, see what he's got to say about a possible deal for James Maddison.
So Arsenal are the latest club to be linked with James Maddison, join Chelsea and Man United in being linked with him, and it's not surprising. He is a great talent, an attacking talent. Last season he was on fire in the first half of the season. He'd answered all of Brendan Rodgers' calls to increase his numbers in terms of goals and assists, but a hip injury sort of ended his hopes of gate crashing the England party. He really went off the boil in those final few months of the season because he just couldn't get his full fitness back because of the frequency of games. There was no time for training. So that was a real shame for him, but obviously that still hasn't stopped any rumours that he might be targeted by one of the bigger clubs. And that is the nature of Leicester City. Whenever they have a talent, they're always linked with a move elsewhere. But historically, they only ever sell one. Every summer since they won the title in 2016, they've sold one player. It's been Kante, Drinkwater, Mahrez, Maguire, Chilwell. Those 5 players they recruited for 25 million. They sold them for a combined total of 250 million. So if anybody's going to come in for Maddison this summer, unless they don't want to sell and they don't need to sell and they're still investing despite losses of 67 million in the last financial report, they're still investing in the club, in the stadium, in the training ground. So there is no financial need to sell either. It's only if the player indicates to the club that he wants to move on, and Brendan Rodgers has put it on record that he doesn't see the point in keeping players that are unhappy or want to move on. That doesn't happen very often. At Leicester City, the players seem particularly happy, but if Maddison does indicate he wants to move on and a huge offer comes in for him, then I'm sure Leicester City would consider it. Going into this summer, we normally know when the other lads have left. We've always known that they are likely to leave, but going into this summer, it wasn't that situation with any of the players, although Tielemans in the last few weeks before the Euros was being linked heavily with a move to Liverpool. He's been given a contract offer which is on the table, and he's not going to sign it at the moment because he wants to concentrate on the Euros. So we'll see what happens with that afterwards. But it'll only be one. So if Tielemans goes, then Maddison won't go. And Rodgers has said his plan for the transfer window was to add more attacking quality to his midfield, not decrease it by letting Maddison leave. They're bringing in Boukari Samari from Lille, but he's more of a deep line, a hybrid of a midfielder between Tielemans and Ndidi. He's not a creative goal scoring midfielder. He's only scored one senior goal in his career. So if Maddison was to leave, it would leave Leicester with a problem trying to replace him. So personally, I can't see it happening. But if somebody comes in with a huge offer, then Leicester might consider it.
A massive thank you to Rob for helping us out with today's video. You can find him on Twitter. Link to his account will be in the description. He is the Athletics Leicester correspondent, and some interesting information there regarding James Maddison. When I spoke to him last night, the figures that he was talking about were in the region of 50 to 60 million plus, is what he said. And whilst I think it would take a lot more than that, I think you're looking at upwards of 60 million easy, going into the 70s, maybe even the 80s, for Leicester to really consider James Maddison as a possible sale, because this is what they do. As he talked about, £250 million made from Kante and Maguire and Mahrez, Ben Chilwell. They just make so much money from selling players, and they know that the teams will come along and pay big money, because they know also that they have the faith in their recruitment team to replace those. And arguably, if they let James Maddison go, I have absolutely no fear for them that they wouldn't be able to replace him with someone as good, if not even better, maybe in the future. They just time and time again just are able to do this. If Tielemans goes, Samara coming in from Lille is an already ready-made replacement for him, really, in central midfield. They've got Ndidi there as well. It's just unbelievably good. Even producing talent, when you look with Harvey Barnes, who's there as well, as a very young guy who came through. So there's some amazing amounts of talent in that Leicester squad. Anyway, as I said, a massive thank you to Rob. But we are going to move on to the next part of our video, which is making sure we have a look at his statistics and see how he compares to some of the current Arsenal squad and how he compares to some of our transfer targets. In fact, today what we've done is we're comparing him to Martin Odegaard, to Nabil Fekir, and to Houssem Aouar, three players that have been linked to Arsenal. It seems like Odegaard is going to be remaining with Real Madrid, but it's good to see how they compare to Maddison. These stats are taken from Wisecout. They're the league statistics averaged across 90 minutes, other than the goal statistics, which we'll come on to in a second. But the heat maps, if we have a look. Now, interestingly, Arsenal's attacking midfielders that we have been linked to, typically, you look at the likes of Fekir, you look at Buendia. Those two players typically skewed towards the right-hand side, which meant that they were then cutting in on their left or their right foot, and either side playing those inverted passes. Maddison, when he plays, is actually more of the other side. He does tend to skew to the left, but can play either side as well, as you've seen with the heat map there. Likes to play in and around the box. He's not your type to get into the box too often. He certainly does the majority of his work from the outside, trying to create for Leicester City. And when he does take his shots, they are also from outside the box, and we'll come on to that in a bit. If we have a look at then the goals, assists, and appearances, 8 goals, 7 assists in the Premier League this season is a great return, considering he returned much less goal contribution in the Premier League last season. As Rob touched upon, Brendan Rodgers has asked him to really step up that goals and the outfield play from Maddison this season. He's certainly done that, and he's the highest in regards to those goals and assists raw stats in our comparison chart here, in only 31 games as well, because he has missed games this season because of injury. If we then go on to his passing statistics, 39.21 on average passes per game with an 84.6% is actually the lowest accuracy on our list. However, he is one of the most proactive passers in the game. If we have a look into the passes into the final third, 5.45, only coming in behind Houssem Aouar in terms of frequency, always trying to find that ball to the wide areas, be that for Harvey Barnes or Jose Perez, or be it through for Jamie Vardy and Iheanacho. But he's really got that key pass into the final third sorted. But he does have the lowest accuracy in terms of these. You have to remember, he is playing in the Premier League in comparison to, say, Fekir and Aouar. But Odegaard coming in at 88.1 is a very impressive stat in terms of his accuracy, and I think that's the type of player that Arteta was looking for, someone with the real accuracy of passing in the final stages of the game. If we have a look at how he passes inside to the box, again, the lowest accuracy on our list at 54.9%. 2.87 passes being made is the second highest frequency, but it is all very kind of bunched and very close to one another. And if you consider the fact that Rodrigo de Paul was nearly double, or was double that statistic in terms of frequency, is it enough to really go for that 70 to 80 million pound figure that it would cost to get Maddison based on those passing stats? It would be very tricky, but he does seem to come up with the right kind of passes, hence why he's got 7 assists and, of course, his shooting with 8 goals. If we go into his dribbling, 3.51 is the third highest. He's not as much of a dribbler as, say, an Aouar or as a Fekir, but he is certainly more of a dribbler than the players like a Martin Odegaard, who likes to pull the strings from outside the box. Maddison will travel with the ball if he needs to. This is sometimes to either make a pass or take a shot. And with a 48.3% dribbling accuracy, maybe that's why it's slightly lower that he tries it, because he's also got the kind of the combination. If anything, he's more of a hybrid between the two of Fekir and Erdegaard. He falls in that middle ground of someone who can create with his passing and can also carry the ball. If we go into the progressive runs, 1.29 in comparison, he's not really transitioning it with his runs from one half to the other. He does most of his work in the opposition half when on the ball. So that's why you see those progressive runs quite low. If we go then finally into the shooting statistics, he has got the second highest shot frequency at 2.99. But in regards to the shooting accuracy, just ever so slightly lower than that of Nabil Fekir. But as you can see from the amount of shots that he's taken, the large majority of those shots are coming from outside the box. And he is getting a fair few goals from outside the box as well. But typically the ones that he have scored on the whole, the 5 of the 8 there, have come from inside the box, but typically do tend to be closer to the edge rather than being in kind of the right place at the right time. Ball being played back to him, running into the box, taking his shots from outside or just on the edge of the box is where he really thrives. And that makes him the difference between him and, say, Erdegaard, who tends not to take too many shots, whereas in comparison to Maddison, who certainly does. If we then move on to the final part of the video, which is, of course, getting your thoughts and feelings in the chat box. So if you do have some thoughts, please throw them into the chat box now, and we'll try and get through as many of them as we feasibly can. Yo-Yo says, buying the likes of Maddison and White may have to do with the registration purposes. 2 birds, 1 stone. Thinking about, of course, looking at players that are homegrown is something that really attracts, or rather is attractive to Arsenal. They currently have 17 non-homegrown players on their books, which is the maximum that you can have. Of course, we are looking to move on the likes of Xhaka, Guendouzi, Torreira. These players, of course, would then make space on that list. And that's probably part of the reason why you haven't seen too many incomings at the moment, because we're still trying to shift quite a lot of our non-homegrown players off the books. Half South African says, Awar is definitely my first choice for price and quality. Omar says, what are the chances of this actually happening? If you want to ask me how likely this is, you've probably seen a lot of reports linking us to Maddison over the last 24 hours or so. What you need to be looking for to see some genuine credibility is news of bids, not news of interest, not news of him being a priority target, not news of we're stepping up our liking of the player. You need to look for credible pieces of information that are coming out that are saying Arsenal have bid this much, are in talks for this amount of money. See specific figures. If you start seeing reports saying that we are in talks, we're interested, we're stepping up the interest, blah, 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 he's a priority target, blah, 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 really take it with a pinch of salt. It's really easy of a story to kind of create right now until you start seeing the real figures and the talk of actual bids going in. Until that point, we'll reserve judgment. I would be exceptionally surprised if Arsenal went and got James Maddison this summer to get him, although I feel that Leicester would sell him at the right price, and that right price is upwards of about £70 million. For me, Leicester would sell. It's not a case of going, why would he leave or why would Leicester sell? Leicester do sell players, but they only tend to be one big player each season. If Tielemans goes, I'd pretty much agree with Rob and what he said earlier. If Tielemans goes, there's no chance of this happening. But if Tielemans stays and a big bid goes in for James Maddison, it can happen. But again, in terms of likelihood, I'm giving this a solid 3 out of 10 on the Arsenal scale this summer. If I'm proven wrong, I'd be ecstatic because it'd be obviously a great signing for Arsenal, but I just personally can't see it happening. Dylan says, would rather spend the 80-odd million on Grealish. And I have to agree with this, is when you get to those James Maddison kinds of figures, you then start going into the realms of Jack Grealish. Now, of course, the difference between that is that there is competition from the likes of Man City and Chelsea, etc. It would be down to the player whether he wanted to move to Arsenal, knowing he would be playing week in, week out for the Gunners. But again, if you're getting to those kind of figures, I think it's probably worth going the extra 10 to 20 million pounds and going for Grealish if you're willing to spend that amount of money. Ansgar says, Maddison from the eye test seems much more proactive than Erdegaard. Not sure if that makes him better. Of course, someone who likes to do a lot more work on the ball in regards to in possession of it, dribbling with it, travelling with it. So in regards to the eye test, he does come across as a much more proactive player than Erdegaard. Prefers to kind of pull the strings from outside of the box rather than travelling with the ball and being proactive in that sense. Matt G says, we are looking at, interested in, intrigued by, potentially going for, setting up a meeting with, going to call, made contact with, and then also Man City get them in the end. Yes, you need to be careful of these types of words when you're looking around on social media and seeing links that ITK is tweeting out. If it's interest, if it's stuff like that, if they're like in talks, really take it with a pinch of salt. You need to be looking for genuine figures from verified sources before you really go down the route of the thing with Thomas Partey last season, which is, of course, where the Bell, as we know, the AFC Bell that's now tweeted this information today. The thing about Thomas Partey last season is that he had a release clause. So there was always a chance that Arsenal could go out and spend the money that they needed to get him on that release clause, whereas James Maddison doesn't have that. It's a much trickier situation to bank on. And so therefore, by saying words like Arsenal are interested in, or Maddison is Arsenal's priority target, is very safe, because you're not saying that Arsenal are going to get him, etc. It's all down to speculative kind of narratives right now. Anyway, that is going to round off today's show. Thank you ever so much, everyone that's tuning in. Make sure you drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. I'm planning on hopefully getting another show out to you today. It will be pre-recorded. It will be a tactical breakdown on Manuel Locatelli, fingers crossed, coming out about an hour before the Italy game. Probably a good time to put that video out. Just before Italy do play. But because I work from 3 to 11, I'm going to record it before I start, and then I'm going to upload it and make sure it kind of goes out at that certain time. So there won't be any live interaction, but you will still get all your statistical comparisons, and you will, of course, get the expert insight as well on Manuel Locatelli. So fingers crossed that should be out for you guys this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you as always, guys. See you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.